What's good, y'all? We back on Planet Rell, and today I present to you the full story of the first arc of the Immortal Thor. All weather turns to storm. Let's get into it. So we start here in Asgard, and we still got broken shards of the Bifrost. And the narrator asks, would you know more? Then goes to talk about the 10 realms within Yggdrasil, and how Asgard is the realm of gold, a world of glory, and where everything was a grand saga. But with every fall, there was a Ragnarok. And Asgard is a land of gods with deep meaning, and even broken things in Asgard are beautiful. And now we see Sif overlooking everything. And Thor asks her how's her vigil going, and she tells him it just goes, like she just been going through the motions of it. Then she says the duties of her brother, Heimdall, must not stop because he died. And Heimdall died because he got stabbed a few times by Bullseye, and this took place during Al Ewing's Valkyrie series. Now Sif tells Thor that even a broken Bifrost should be guarded, and then she stops her sentence and turns around and asks Thor, should she be worried? And that's because Thor has on his classic outfit. And Sif asks him, does anything from the past come to threaten him from his throne? But Thor laughs at it, and he tells Sif that his obligations have grown since the last time he wore this outfit. And the journey since then has been long, filled with doubts and fears. And even Sif saw his fears and doubts. Now Thor's journey is done. He won the prize, he's the king of Asgard. And even though he may be king, he is still Thor when it's all said and done. And he won't deny either role. Now Sif tells Thor that it's been some time since the hammer seemed light in Thor's hand. And I remember during Donny Cates' run, issue 1 to be exact, where he grunted when he picked it up, and I was like, hold on, he ain't supposed to be doing that. Now back to the story. Thor says Mjolnir is the hammer of the Allfather, and that the magic is his to command now, and that Mjolnir is a part of him. Now this old friend deserves a new beginning. And if you don't know or just don't remember, Mjolnir was destroyed back during Donny Cates' run during the God of Hammers arc. And Thor did that to destroy the essence of Mjolnir, the God Tempest. And the God Tempest was an actual storm that Odin fought against, and he contained it within a piece of Uru. And he took that piece of Uru and gave it back to the dwarves, and they made Mjolnir. Now since Thor says Mjolnir deserves a new beginning, the decision was made and the die was cast. Then Thor uses his All-Father power to have Mjolnir be reborn. And using the All-Father power can make Thor just go into the All-Sleep. But now Mjolnir has been reborn, and Thor feels a forgotten weight lifted off his soul. So Sif asks Thor, is it wise to use the All-Father power to turn back the Wheel of Fate? And he tells her that the Wheel of Fate sometimes turns all around, and that sometimes it brings us home. Now the narrator says that Asgard was home, where everything has meaning. Now the echo of Thor's words about being home was a dark thunder in a land far away. And now we see Thor beat up, bloody, and bruised, holding Mjolnir, a new axe, and with the belt of strength on, known as Megingjord. And the way this story is going, it's been great, but I still want to know, how do we even get to this point? Now let's get into the history of Megingjord, the belt of strength. Its first appearance was in Journey into Mystery, issue 91. Thor was fighting against a guy named Sandu and Loki, and Thor was losing, so Odin gave the belt of strength to the Valkyries to give to Thor so he could win. Now in issue 363, Thor was fighting against Curse, and Thor even said to himself, like, Curse's strength is crazy, I need the belt of strength. Now just 2 issues after this one, we get our introduction to Throg, and he's wearing the belt of strength. Now in issue 388, 13 chapters later, Thor was wearing the belt of strength, fighting against the Celestials. Now lastly, in the previous run of Thor written by Donny Cates, where Odin's funeral took place, we saw the belt of strength once again. And Thor had the belt of strength, the shield of life, and the gauntlet of tomorrows. And Thor used all of that to fight against Mangog. And so with that being said, would you know more? And if so, let's get into chapter 1 of the Immortal Thor. So we start here in a mysterious place with a narration, and the narrator brings up the 10 realms and how they're filled with gods, magicians, elves, dwarves, angels, and dead souls. And where this character is, there are no realms and there are no gods, because gods are things of stories, and those stories are shadow play cast on a cave wall. And the narrator asks, what brings the shadow and what blocks out the light? And to start out the dialogue, the narrator says, if you want to understand, you need to open your mind. And to finish the dialogue, this question is asking if we understand yet or not. And this new mysterious character says, the wheel turns. And when I read it, I'm like, what wheel is turning? What is he talking about? And stuff like that in the story makes me more interested because I want to find out what it is. Now we get to see some frost giants going against the Warriors 4. And the frost giant Skrymir tells them to attack. And he's a wizard in Jotunheim. And Skrymir says he's the true and rightful king of Jotunheim. Now the narrator continues their dialogue asking about Asgard, which is the realm of the heroes of legend, the Aesir god. And the narrator says that Asgard is no longer golden, but instead silver. And that is because in the land of the gods, it is now winter. Now we see Hogun and Fandral talking about Skrymir and his magic. But Vostak like, bro, we gonna end up frozen. But Hildegard is like, don't worry and have no fear. And she tells him that because their king is there. And the narrator says Thor did not stand in battle, but he soared. And now we finally see the king of Asgard. So Skrymir is like, I launch a full attack with my magic against Asgard, and they only respond with one god. And Skrymir talking about he gonna pack Thor up, and he asks him what his warriors gonna do. And I'm just sitting here like, dog, you know you the one that's gonna get packed up. And now Thor says he's not in the mood because he's disappointed. And Skrymir just looks stuck, and he like, you disappointed? And he just wonders why Thor is disappointed because he turned everything to snow and ice. Then they start to laugh at Thor. But Thor tells Skrymir that his words were not for him. And I'm glad Thor has a controlled temper because he could have just destroyed him by the way they disrespected him like that. Then Thor tells the frost giants who he's talking about. He says, his unfaithful servant. And Skrymir is like, the sky? And Thor tells them that even though it's a snowstorm, it's still his storm to command. And then he tells the storm to leave. Then lo and behold, the land clears up and the sun is coming out. Then the frost giants start to run away because they'll melt in the sun. And Skrymir wants them to hold their ground. But Thor tells Skrymir to let him go. And the reason he let him go because they were young giants and he knew they were persuaded by Skrymir. And if Thor let loose the armies of Asgard, it would have been a massacre. And now Thor and Skrymir are getting ready to fight. Then he calls Thor soft and unleashes his magic against him. And from the ancient tales, Skrymir takes the name Utgard-Loki. And he continues to talk about what his magic gonna do to Thor. And Thor's like, yeah, if it hits me. And he tells Skrymir that it's best to leave how he came. And Skrymir continues to throw his magic at Thor. And he says that Thor is afraid, which is cap. And he mentions that he only has to hit Thor one time with his magic. And Thor says those words are true, and that Mjolnir will say the same. And now the narrator is back saying some people would say that Mjolnir did speak in that moment, and it was eloquently. Then Skrymir's body shatters by Thor's attack with Mjolnir. That boy Skrymir got put in the pack easy. Now Fandral is like, good job, bro. And it was best for Thor to end it that way, very quickly. But he didn't want to even fight Skrymir. Now Hildegard tells Thor that Skrymir's death might not have been permanent because his head has grown back before. And we saw Skrymir die before, and that was back in Thor issue 3 when Jane was Thor. And he froze Jane, then he ate her. And then out of nowhere, she just blew his head off. Now back to the story. Thor says that Skrymir's attack signals that there's a greater problem on its way. And since Loki rules over Jotunheim, Thor asks, what was Loki doing during this time? Was Loki trying to prevent it, or was Loki trying to encourage it? Then Loki pops up out of nowhere saying that they've been there the whole time. And I know Thor was like, come on, man. Now Hogun and Fandral are talking about how Loki looks. And then Loki and Fandral compliment each other. Then Thor says it's enough because he's ready to talk to Loki. And as he asks Loki about being the ruler of Jotunheim, Loki says that it didn't work out. Now Thor is shocked by this. He in the back like, oh, hell no! Hell no! And now Thor is yelling at Loki. And he's like, bro, you claim the throne and you have the responsibility. You can't quit what you started. And Loki's like, nah, you can't. Now project that onto me. Then Loki says the giants in Jotunheim can rule themselves. And since Loki can be a man or woman, Loki says that they can rule their own self. And Thor's like, alright, bet. I ain't gonna force you to rule over Jotunheim more than I rule over Asgard. Then he tells Loki like, bro, I remember your past mischiefs. And he wonders what makes Loki come back to Asgard. But since Loki is the god and the goddess of the story, the Scald of the Realms, they just go wherever the stories are. Now the narrator is back, and they say it's true in a way, in that it's not the whole truth. But for every storyteller, there's a liar, a trickster, and a traitor. And the first and utmost allegiance is to the story. And no cap, bro, seeing that missing tooth right there made me think of this story from the prologue. And I know y'all was thinking the same thing probably. Loki really got some stuff up their sleeve. And the narrator says to trust is to risk your own heart. And that's some real life stuff. Now Thor is glad that Loki's home. And he said that they'll clean up his mishaps as they go. Then Loki says, let's whip up a nice rainbow bridge. And I'm like, man, they finna fix the Bifrost. And I was waiting for the Bifrost to get fixed, so I'm a little turnt on the inside. I'm sitting there reading it like, and I know y'all probably peeped it too. The narrator asks again, do we understand? And if we don't understand yet, we will. Now we see Thor and Asgard looking upon the broken Bifrost. And he said before it was Asgard's greatest treasure. And since it was broken, it marks his greatest failure as the king of Asgard. And me personally, in my opinion, I don't think it was a failure because he was out of his mind when it happened. And if you don't know what happened, he broke the Bifrost by holding back Sif's power. And that happened during Banner of War. Now Thor is saying that Loki said that it would have taken up to 10,000 years to fix the Bifrost. And Thor wonders what dark deal has Loki made. But Loki didn't make a deal. They found it within the Collector's vault. Loki probably stole it for real, no cap. And Loki says it's called the Wand of Whatever, aka the Wand of Whatever. And it's filled with mystery magic from the elders of the universe. And Thor says it's best not to know about Loki's adventures. Then he tells Loki to make the attempt to fix it, and he's going to stand on guard just in case if it so happens to backfire. And the narrator says it wouldn't backfire because the wand was made of whittled driftwood, and that it was a prop with a pretty story attached to it. And the wand hid a lie, and that lie hid a deeper magic. Now as Loki goes up to fix the Bifrost, the narrator says at the heart of the magic, it was a question. And this is in real life also, but in this story, the narrator says that people are told what is possible and allowable for them, who they are, who they can be, and who they shall be. And the narrator brings up how patterns are in stories. The gods have Ragnarok, and Thor even has a Black Winter. And from the speaking point of the Black Winter, which causes death, the narrator asks, what if spring could come again? And what if things grow where nothing could? Imagine if the future is unwritten, the present uncontained. Imagine if you can go anywhere, be anything, and be anybody. And if anybody could write their own story, they would. Then as we see Loki striking the wand to fix the Bifrost, a question is asked. What if all the gods and mortals were free? And what would we do if all of our cages are open? Now we got a fixed and restored Bifrost. Then the narrator says that magic is a symbol and a metaphor. And moments like this are turned into power by stories. And whoever tells a story harnesses that power. And the narrator finishes by saying, no journey is without trial. And spring doesn't come without winter. And that no magic is without cost. Then the narrator apologizes to Thor again, and that makes me wonder what's about to happen. Now Thor can keep his promise to his dad about being in less of a bad mood being on the throne. And since the Bifrost is back, it gives Thor a better mood. And now that it is restored, it gives Sif an easier job to handle. Now Thor says a new chapter for Asgard has started, and he thanks Loki. He has very great gratitude for him. And then Thor looks over, and he sees that Loki has disappeared. And the narrator apologizes again, and I just wonder what for. And Loki leaving like that troubles Thor, and I would wonder what's going on too if one of my siblings left like that. Now Sif is talking about how Thor is never going to be comfortable on his throne because he's always going to be doing something, whether in Asgard or somewhere else. Then she tells him that he's had enough Asgard for the day, and that he needs to visit his other home. Then Thor takes off on the Bifrost, and he heads to Earth, his second home. Then the narrator asks, is it strange for Thor's heart to be glad to leave his original home of Asgard? But his family knew that his soul was between the two worlds of Asgard and Earth. Now Thor loved being on Earth, and the people there loved him as well. But they didn't love him as a god. And Thor had no worshippers on Earth, and he didn't want that either, because the people of Earth were his friends. And if you needed help as a friend in need, he would do that. And he would do everything in his power to stop it. And he wouldn't stop until justice was served. And I'm glad Thor enjoys himself on Earth. Like you can see, he even had a couple drinks with him. And a lot of people welcome Thor on Earth, especially the places where kindness and hope were. Now Thor flies off at night, and he needs a moment to himself, some solitude, and to be alone with his thoughts. Now Thor is to himself, and he wonders how long it's been, because the way he perceives time is very different from people on Earth. He could be gone in a couple days in his mind, but years have passed on Earth. And he calls on some old friends that are now deceased. And the two that stuck out to me were Aya Nahanda, who is the ancient Black Panther, and Captain Marvel. Now Thor is demanding the universe to tell him, but it cannot be done. And he does it not to test his power, but his limits. And he says there are forces out here that even a god must bow down to. But Thor isn't the type to bow down to anybody if they oppose him. And Thor is secure in himself, and Mjolnir is whole now. And the weight of Mjolnir no longer defines him. And since he has the magic of the Allfather, he decides who's worthy of Mjolnir. And since he's been king for a while, he must command himself and do what he has to do for himself, and not follow what his father used to do. But he says that's not as easy as commanding the sky. And there is a storm going crazy, and he says it's too much for the mortals there on Earth, and he commands it to leave. And now the narrator is saying that Thor made an error, and that it was not his thunder to command. Then Thor falls off the Statue of Liberty, and the narrator is saying that Thor was only the god of the storm, but who is the god of the superstorm? Now me being a person who loves lore and mythos, Al Ewing is finna add more to it. Cause when it said who was the god of the superstorms, I'm like, oh man, what's finna happen? Then we see Thor hit the ground and starts to get up, and the narrator says, what god will reign when hurricane winds destroy the earth? And what god condemns the darkness of humanity instead of celebrating the light of humanity? And this narrator is cooking for real with these questions. They ask what are the gods to the Aesir, as the Aesir are the gods to the human beings on Earth. And as Thor looks up in utter shock, the narrator asks, what dark place would it come from? Now I'm wondering what evil is about to come. Then we see a dark figure in the sky, holding lightning bolts. And this is the same character from the beginning, saying the wheel has turned. And this character says this world has stagnated too long and has chosen illusion over change. And he says they sleepwalk through a dream of life and that he's the bloody awakening. Then he says where he's from, and it's from Utgard, which is the storied land that Skrymer was talking about earlier. And this character says that it's the land of the truth, and that he's come to shatter this false world. And his name is Tyrannos, and he is the Utgard Thor. And now we see destruction and chaos. Now Thor thinks back on Skrymer taking the name of Utgard Loki. He thought of his past trip when he went to the Utgard lands. And that took place during Thor issue 272. And Thor and Loki met Skrymer, who was really the Utgard king. And they were doing these challenges and they was losing. And now we see more chaos throughout the city from the storm. And now Thor tells Tyrannos to listen to him. And Thor tells Tyrannos that he's in his true element and that he calls on the might and power that flows through his veins. Because he is the son of Odin and Gaia, who defends Earth as the Avenger, bringing justice. And most of all for Thor, he is the Allfather, and he summons and strikes Tyrannos with every bit of that power. Then the narrator says that the earth trembles at the war that just began, and that it reaches beyond Midgard. Another statement from the beginning is repeated. If you will understand, then open your mind. And now somebody is saying the wheel has turned. And where there are no realms. And now there's another mysterious character, and they say that their brother Tyrannos walks toward again. Then we see Gaia, and the other character says that Thor, her son, hinders Tyrannos' rage. And they ask Gaia, is it how she wanted it to be? And she says a little bit, but she would have chosen other options if they were available. And that's because she had something sealed up from a very long time ago. Then I peeped their brother and sister, so I'm just like, yo, what's going on? Then this mysterious character talks about how they're brought up in dark legends alongside with Tyrannos and Gaia. And you already know they are powerful because their names are used as talisman. And he remembers Scrymer, and he asks has Thor fought anybody named Tyrannos in his past. But he hasn't. It was a troll named Daenerys. And that took place during the Mighty Thor run, written by Matt Fraction. Now we start to get more of a revealing of this new character, and they say that Thor will be tested by more than just trolls. And if he fails, it would be the end of everything. And they have a rule that all things must grow and live, or wither and die. And this Age of Marvels is not an exception to the rule. And Gaia says the outcome cannot be predicted. Then Gaia says Loki might be testing Thor as well, alongside with what he got going on in front of him. And Loki plays no favorites. And this dude starts to laugh as he remembers Loki. And he says Loki, the troll, and Scrymer are their understudies. Then he says his sister Gaia was once his jailer and his ancient foe. And I would like to see that flashback. And they most likely fought because of that, and I would like to see that too. Then his character says, if Thor can be tested by Loki, then he will be utterly destroyed by the Utgard Loki. So we start here with Odin standing before Yggdrasil, and he's about to receive wisdom. And if you didn't know how he lost his eye, this is how it happened. And the narrator says, knowledge is power. And then within this specific case, it is great power. Like really great power. Now Odin stabs himself in the eye, plucks his eye out in exchange for wisdom. Now Yggdrasil is pulling Odin within it, and the voice of Yggdrasil says, this is the lesson in the parable. Then Yggdrasil wraps Odin up like he's in a cocoon, and Yggdrasil tells Odin that the story will always change, but the meaning will remain, and a sacrifice will always have to be made. So Odin is within the confines of Yggdrasil, and there is a transformation happening. And Yggdrasil says, for winter to end and for spring to begin, there will always be a cost. Then Odin explodes out of Yggdrasil, now having knowledge beyond knowledge and power beyond power. And this power, which is the Odin power, will be passed down like a treasure, and it has to be used very wisely and sparingly. And now that Odin made his own sacrifice, Yggdrasil says that there will be a time where his children will make their sacrifice. And all power comes at a price. That's why the Odin power has to be used wisely and sparingly. And Thor will now feel that price. Alright, let's pause real quick. This was once shown before during the Mighty Thor written by Matt Fraction, during the Fear Itself event. And I like how they portrayed it during that issue too, this one as well. And now to expand on this more. Back during Thor Disassembled, Thor went to go get wisdom, and he plucked out one of his eyes as well. But his father already done it, so he had to pluck out both of his eyes. And they don't mention this, but Thor and Odin both hung themselves when they did this. Like they had to go to the extreme for this. And after all that was done, Thor was able to see everything past, present, and future. Like he saw everything. And that played a part on how Thor became the Rune King. And there will be episodes about that story soon to come, because that story was so raw when I first read it. And if you didn't watch the first episode of Immortal Thor, I will put it in the description below so y'all can watch it. And make sure y'all hit that like and subscribe button while y'all doing that. Alright, boom. So we left off talking about the Odin power and how Thor will feel that price of that power, because he called upon that power to fight Tornos. And Thor strikes Tornos with some lightning. And Tornos calls Thor a micro god. And he says Thor's lightning is nothing compared to his. He's basically calling it trash.
Me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect.
Now Tornos has the Wheel of Fate, and he throws it at Thor, and Thor does his best to dodge. And he gets out the way, and then he says to himself that even him having the Odin power, Tornos is still overwhelming him. And for Thor to use the Odin power, it will bring on the All Sleep. And for those who don't know, I'm going to tell y'all what it is right now. So it's not that much of an explanation, but it's a type of deep sleep where you just recharge the all power, or Odin power, or Thor power, since that's what it really is now. And while you're in the all sleep, you can be asleep for like a day or even a week. Like you gonna be asleep for however long it takes to recover. And this happened before the Thor, back during JMS's run. And during issue 6 of that run, Thor went out into space, and he used that power to restore every single Asgardian. And when the job was done, Thor passed out and fell to Earth. Then at the start of issue 7, Hogan and Balder brought in Thor so he can enter the all sleep. Alright, back to the story. My boy Thor is so tired, and he sees that Tornos is still fresh. And Tornos says to Thor that the wheel is turning for Midgard, but the wheel must turn for Thor first. And Tornos continues to speak down on Thor, saying that the time for small gods is over. Bruh, I would have looked up at Tornos like, who is you talking to, bruh? Then Thor says if he can't defeat Tornos, he must delay him. And he yells out to Tornos like, you may be an elder god, but I'm Thor. And when I tell Earth's skies to open, they open. And a large lightning strike splits the sky open. And Tornos laughs and says Thor, the god of ants, sends a lightning strike against him and cannot even hit him. Now I ain't go cap, Tornos is talking his trash, bro. But if I'm Thor, I would have said something back on some,
Hey, shut the fuck up, nigga. Shut your bitch ass up before I smack.
And Thor gives a little smirk, and he tells Tornos, before you talk any more trash, you might want to turn around and look. And that lightning strike that Tornos was talking down on opens up into a whole nother dimension. And at that moment, Thor literally opened up the sky. And the narrator says that little smirk that Thor gave had a little mischief in it. And you already know who I thought of. And now Thor is swinging Mjolnir in the air, and Mjolnir has been able to open dimensions before. Now let's go back to issue 425 of Thor. Ymir and Surtur were fighting, and Thor had to intervene because the universe was at stake. So he just sent them to a whole nother dimension, and the dimension was called the Sea of Eternal Night. He got them boys up out of here. And now Thor must send Tornos through that portal that he opened. And that portal is at the farthest end of eternity. And Tornos is trying to stay on Earth while the vacuum of space is pulling at him. Now Tornos is still talking his trash. And he calls Thor a fool king. And he says, how do you plan on banishing me with the wind? For I am the wind itself. Then Tornos continues to talk down on Thor. And he says Thor's limits are all too apparent, while his are beyond Thor's knowledge. And Thor is about to pass out from the all sleep, but he musters up some strength, and he says that his limits may be all apparent, but he made Tornos drop his guard. Then he tells the winds of Midgard to blow like never before and get this contagion, aka Tornos, out of his presence. My boy Thor was talking that talk. He called Tornos an ancient contagion, and now the sky is sealed. And Thor knows that Tornos will only be gone for a period of time. And he also knows that Tornos will be hunting for him. But the good news right now, Thor can get some rest. And Thor knows he needs to go get into bed because he used a hefty amount of the all power. And he's way more exhausted than he wants to admit. Because more of the all power he uses, the deeper and longer the all sleep will be. And Thor going into the all sleep is a risk. And I should have said this earlier, but when you're in the all sleep, you're vulnerable. And that's why he needs to be somewhere safe, because he doesn't need to be in harm's way while in the all sleep. And I wonder if he's going to use the casket that he used back during JMS's run. And that casket has enchantments on it, and it creates a state between life and death, and it also reduces the time of the all sleep. Now Thor says Tornos might have been right about calling him a fool, but he would be a bad king if he left things as they are. Now remember back during episode 1, Tornos caused a lot of damage to the city, even destroying the Statue of Liberty. And now Thor looks upon the destructive city, and he wonders how many people are dying and how many people are already dead. And I know Thor is pissed about all of this because Tornos only came there because Thor was there. And Thor thinks back on a moment where Tornos said that the wheel must turn for him first before Midgard. And Thor says who would he be if he just left and flew away and left the city how it is. And Thor not just about to allow things to be how they are. So he gets ready to fix everything that was destroyed. And Thor knows it'll be a difficult job, and he has to use the all power. And since he's used a lot of it already, he has to be very careful with it because he is already very tired. And Thor has to filter the all power through Mjolnir in a detailed manner, through time and space. Then he says a prayer to his half-brother Bragi, the god of poetry. And he does that because there is a certain type of poetry that needs to be done for this job to be completed. Now Thor is preparing his power and himself to right all the wrongs. And Thor says it may seem impossible, but he has to try. And that's real because you never know until you try. Then Thor says, Odin, be with me. And he uses his chronokinesis power to fix all the damage throughout the city. And throughout those panels, the narrator was speaking. And I'm gonna summarize what the narrator was saying. The narrator says, imagine yourself climbing a mountain and you have exhausted all of your energy. And then you see it's another mountain, but you have to climb it because lives are at stake. And if you haven't faced your mountain upon mountain, I hope you don't. But if you have faced it or are going through it now, you have the courage of Thor. And now we see a restored Statue of Liberty. And Thor says he's been blessed by Odin or his half-brother Bragi. And I know he's just glad the job is completed. And now the people that were hurt by the damage and caught up under it are now being freed and cared for. And Thor says the dead remain dead. And I know that pisses Thor off because they were innocent. And this is how you know Thor cares about the people of Earth. He decides to leave because he knows he's Tornos' target. And if he stays on Earth, there will be more innocent lives lost. And he can't go back to Asgard either because he doesn't want that elder god to go there and destroy things. And Thor knows it's his job to protect Asgard, but he has to do it in absence. Now Thor takes off with Mjolnir, breaking space barriers to get to where he needs to go. And he arrives at a place where he will be the only one in danger. And that place is the gray area of the moon. And that place was once where the Inhumans were. Now Thor says this would be a great place for a battle. Then he brings up how tired he is. And with every second he draws closer to being in an all-sleep. And Thor can't hold it back no longer. And he knows if and when Tornos comes after him, he will be weak, hoping for a miracle. Then somebody says Thor's name, and it's Loki. And Loki asks Thor, do you trust me?
No.
And Thor like, dog, what? And since Loki is there, Thor wondered if Sif saw him and what was going on. And Loki like, nah bro, she may be the guardian of the Bifrost, but she ain't your babysitter. Then Thor tells Loki everything that happened with him and Tornos. And Loki knows Thor is about to be in the all-sleep. And Thor says he must warn Asgard about Tornos. And after that, he don't care about any enchantments on him for protection. And Loki cuts off Thor and tells him, you have to answer the question. And Loki asks Thor, will you trust me?
No.
And Thor says, when a trickster asks, do you trust them? It means trouble. Then Loki says, it's important to answer the question, and you must answer it the right way. And Loki asks Thor, do you trust me as a loyal subject of Asgard?
No.
And Thor's like, dog, what are you saying? Like, I just asked for your help. Yes, I trust you. Then Loki says, that's good. Then goes on to ask, will you trust me as your sibling who loves you? And Thor looks at Loki like, are you good? Are you okay? And Thor says he does trust Loki. And he adds on to that by saying Loki is his kin. And he even brought Loki back to life. All because he missed Loki. And Thor says he trusts Loki as his own blood. Then Loki says he has one more question for Thor. And Thor says he's about to pass out, but Loki cuts him off. And they say this one is the most important because the future lies on this. And Loki asks Thor, do you trust me, even as your enemy? And when I read that, I'm thinking in my head like, why would I trust you as my enemy? And after Thor heard that question from Loki, he has many memories from the times where Loki was evil. And Thor wonders what would this bring and what could it cost? And he knows he could not let what was about to happen. But Loki said it was important. And in Thor's heart, he already made his decision. And Thor says he does trust Loki, even as his enemy. Then Thor tells Loki, be what you must be and do what you must do. And now we see Loki in a new form. And Loki says it's been a long time. And it has been some time since we've seen Loki be evil. And Thor says it has been a long time. Then Thor says he has no energy for mercy because he's already fought a war today. Then he asks Loki, as his enemy, his brother, and as his king, do you trust yourself? And is this a wise direction to go in? And the narrator says this is a version of Loki that Thor has never fought before. And Loki answers Thor's question by saying that they will find out. And Thor is now up against Loki in their new aspect, the Teller of Tales. And the narrator says every tale must have their ending. So we start here with Thor sleep. Like, this man is slumped and he's in the all sleep. And I don't know how long he's been asleep, but he's been having a dark dream. And during his dream, he is falling through a never-ending darkness. And as he's falling, he hears the mocking laugh of Loki, who is now again his enemy. And now Thor wakes up yelling Loki's name, and he now has a full beard. He's been asleep for a very long time. Then he looks around and sees that he's in some type of wilderness. And it looks like an alien planet. And I was thinking in my head, like, how did Thor get here? Then he feels his face and he sees he got a beard. And he like, bro, I got a beard just like my dad right now. And after realizing he has a full beard, he wonders how long he has been asleep. And now we find out that he got to this place by Loki's magic. And Loki really did a favor for Thor. And I say that because nobody was able to harm Thor while he was in the all sleep. So Thor was able to regain his full strength. But now Thor wants to leave because he thinks of Tornos causing chaos and destruction at other places. And as he spins Mjolnir to open a doorway, somebody asks, where do you think you're going? And Thor sees that it's Loki. Then he tells Loki that he has no time or patience for games. But Loki responds to him and tells him that it's not a game, but it does have rules, and even Mjolnir cannot break them. And I wonder what rules Loki has in place that even Mjolnir can't even break them. And Loki tells Thor that their magic has bound Thor to this place and to the rune Rado. And this rune was originally the Rune of Journeys, but Loki changed it, reversed it actually. And the Rune of Journeys has been changed into the Rune of Crisis. And the Rune of Crisis disrupts plans and gives unwanted journeys. And Thor knows that Loki is telling the truth because he spins Mjolnir to open dimensional doors, but they won't open. And Thor has a feeling that it can block the all power too. And that would make me so mad if I was Thor and I can't even use my own power. But Thor doesn't even want to use the all power because that would make him vulnerable. And I know he don't want to go back into the all sleep because he just woke up. Then Thor tells Loki that it's a good riddle that they have, but it's the wrong time to play trickster. And now Thor takes off, but he doesn't even know where he's going. But he knows he just wants to leave. But Loki says, if you gonna leave, you better have packed a lunch. And Thor realizes that Loki was telling the truth. Loki said that he was stuck there. And now Thor realizes for himself that he is stuck there. And lately Thor has been having a lot of questions to himself. And he wonders now, is he even in his own reality? And he knows that Tornos cannot possibly find him there. But he wonders what Tornos is doing. Is he causing chaos to his allies or just random people? What is he doing? And Thor comes back down to land and he says, Loki, as your king, I demand. But Loki cuts him off and says, as your fool, I deny. Man, I would have started swinging on Loki on some.
Fight back, nigga! Fight back, nigga! Fight back! Fight back!
But Loki tells Thor to solve the riddle or die where they are. Then Loki tells Thor to use what's in his helmet because it'll help him. And I'm just thinking like, okay, use your brain, be smart, figure it out. Because apparently you gotta solve the riddle to get out of this place. And now Loki turns stones into food. And Loki says, as a jailer, they need to keep their prisoner fed. And you already know That pissed off Thor. Then Thor explodes with anger, and he says that he's no one's prisoner. And after Loki sees that, they like, alright bro. Then takes the rune, flips it upside down, strikes the ground, then leaves. And that left Thor by himself, alone, with his rage. And Thor is so angry because he thinks of Tornos causing chaos and destruction while searching for Thor. And Thor gets so angry that his power destroys the land below. And for an unknown time, it happened over and over again. And Thor's rage was only growing because he was thinking about all the lives that could be lost. Was it his people from Asgard, or the people from Earth, or some alien planet? But Thor don't care about all that. He just doesn't want them in harm's way or getting hurt by Tornos. So yeah, Thor being there, being trapped, not able to do anything because he's trapped there, he was very pissed off. Now Thor has calmed down and he sees what he has done to the landscape around him, but he knows it won't help him escape. Then Thor says to himself that in the past, this will cause Mjolnir to grow heavy in his hand, or he will hear his father Odin scold him. But now since Thor is the All-Father, he has to reprimand himself and decide his own punishment. And now Thor is about to do some hard labor. And Thor thinks about the time that Loki said, use what's in your helmet. And he takes the helmet off and sits it on a stone. And he strikes his helmet with lightning and heats it up. And he uses Mjolnir to mold his new hammer that's also an axe, Tormod. Now this instantly made me think of this panel right here when he had the two hammers in Meginyor, the belt of strength. And it clicks in my head like that gold hammer has to be Tormod. But now Thor uses the axe head to shave his beard. And he does that just in case if it grows back to know how long he's been where he's at. Then Loki comes out of nowhere thinking Thor finna delete himself with the axe. And Loki says it's not the worst fate for Thor unless you compare it to the fate that does await him if he fails to do something. But Thor cuts him off and tells him to stand where he's at, and he throws Mjolnir at him. Then as Mjolnir is about to hit Loki, they turn into butterflies. Then Loki reappears as Mjolnir goes past, and taking Loki's head off would be too easy for Thor. Then Loki says that he can't hack his way out of this Gordian knot. And the definition of Gordian knot means a difficult or intricate problem. Now Loki is saying that Thor has his get out of jail free card, and Thor is holding his get out of jail free card in his hand. And Loki tells Thor to cut the thread of fate and fall because the Valkyries will save him. And Thor responds by telling him that the ways of death are not a game, and there are powers that even a god must bow down to. And to my memory, that's the second time we've heard that statement. So there must be something going on with that. Then Mjolnir breaks the rune as it comes back to Thor. And since the rune is broken now, Thor thinks that the riddle that Loki gave him is gone. But that's not the case. Loki takes a look at the stick and says it's a good trick. Then they fix it and tells Thor that destruction is only one side of the coin and that no trick of yours will save you. Man, I saw that rune being fixed. I went from a smile to a straight face like, now Loki tells Thor that he has the tools within his hands, then leaves again. Now I wanted to make a little correction real quick to the rune and how to pronunciate it. I was saying it wrong. I had to look it up. It's called Rido instead of Rado, how I've been saying it. Now Thor is alone again. And Thor thinks back on the time where he told Loki that even as his enemy, he trusts them. And Thor says Loki shows malevolence of old. Each taunt has a clue. And the game that is currently being played is fair. And Rido is the key to the game. Now back when Thor calmed down from being so angry, he thought of what the answer could be to the game. And he was right. The tools are in his hands. And now he has to put the tools together. Then Thor grabs two things, a tree branch and some binding, to have Tormod be fully born. And according to the narrator, Tormod has three names. Tormod, the Keen Edge, Tormod, the Riddle Solver, and Tormod, the first of three. And the narrator finishes by asking, would you know more? And tells us more will be told. And I'm glad, because that last one, what does that mean? Will he get 3 more hammers? And it made me think back to this panel right here again. Like, how much effect will Tormod have during this story? And I'm starting to think it's more than what we think right now. Now Thor takes Tormod and throws it, and it cuts down a tree in one strike. And Tormod comes back to Thor just like Mjolnir. And that's because Thor imbued it with his All-Father magic. Now Thor sits down to complete his true task. And he says a Gordian knot, a complex problem, has a simple answer. And he thinks about how Loki arrives behind his back, then leaves intentionally in front of Thor's face. And Loki shows the staff in the rune Rito, which is the means of their travel. And Thor thinks back to when Loki said, no trick of his will save him. So Thor creates his own rune staff to match Loki's. Then Loki comes out of nowhere and starts to go off on Thor. And Loki is like, you thought the stick was gonna save you? Nah. And Loki continues by telling Thor that he has failed. And to survive Loki's wrath, Loki says to Thor to give up the throne of Asgard. And if Thor does that, Loki, the god of evil, will let him live. But Thor's like, really, dude? You playing my enemy, but you really want me to succeed. And throughout the history of Thor and Loki, Thor knows one thing, that any Loki that says they want the throne of Asgard is a liar. And now we see Thor has solved the riddle, and he takes Rito, the rune of journeys, and goes home. Now Thor and Loki are back where they were at the end of episode 2. And since they have gone somewhere and came back, no time has passed. And Thor was in an awe sleep, regaining his strength. But he wants to know, what was the point of the game? Then Loki tells Thor it wasn't a game. It was just a lesson that needed to be learned. And Loki tells Thor that he needed a weapon for what is coming. And the weapon he needed was Tormod. And now that he has it, he passed the test. And Thor wonders what would have happened if he failed. And Loki tells him that he will not be alive, and that Thor will be stuck on an alien planet in a forgotten time, and Tornos will destroy everything. Then Loki tells Thor, I may come as your enemy, but I'm the enemy you need. Loki ain't making things easy for Thor at all, but that's a good thing because he's preparing Thor for something major. And the lesson has been learned for Thor, and he knows that using the All-Father power won't defeat Tornos by itself, but using his Asgardian might will change the game. Now the solution to defeat Tornos is within reach, and Thor says they are gonna need allies, and those allies have to share necessary experience. Now Thor says that one of them will not like seeing Loki at her door, and if she is to join, Thor must talk to her by himself. And the person Thor is talking about is the goddess of thunder, Storm. So we start here with Tornos traveling through space, and y'all already know he's after Thor. And whatever you do, Tornos is coming closer. You can wake, you can work, you can eat and sleep, but Tornos is coming closer. And he's definitely gonna catch up to Thor. And the narrator finishes by saying, there are forces that even a god must bow down to. Now this is the third time that we have heard that saying, and it was said for the first time back during episode 1 and the second time during episode 3. Now we head up to Asgard, and Sif, who is the guardian of the Bifrost, who sees everything, sees that Tornos is coming closer and closer. And my boy Beta Ray Bill is here. And Bill asks Sif, is it true that Thor needs his help? And he asks her because Loki told him, and he like, bro, Loki lies and tells stories, so I need to know the truth from you. But before Sif could even say anything, Loki says that they told Bill. And Loki already told Bill because he was #1 on the list. Like he was the #1 draft pick. And Loki is like, I know you saw it, Sif, with your all-seeing eyes. And she says she did see it. Then she brings up things that she doesn't see because of Loki, like Thor's new axe, Tormod. And Loki tells Sif to ask Thor where he got it from because he might just tell her. Now Sif tells Bill that she knows that they aren't what they used to be, and that she can say the same for Bill and Thor. And she said what she said about Bill because they had a little fling going on back during Daniel Warren Johnson's Beta Ray Bill miniseries. And how that part ended, you just know it didn't work out. And then to bring up the topic between Beta Ray Bill and Thor, for those who haven't read Donny Cates' run of Thor, Bill and Thor fought, and that's because Bill found out that Thor was working with Galactus. But Bill didn't know Thor had reason, and when Thor told Bill his reason, Bill still opposed Thor because he was working with Galactus and that lives would be lost on the planets that Galactus consumed. But Beta Ray Bill didn't know that Thor was going to evacuate those planets before Galactus even consumed them. But the biggest thing about the fight between Beta Ray Bill and Thor broke Stormbreaker. He literally just completely destroyed it. And that did irreparable damage between their relationship. And now you see that here because Beta Ray Bill said he once called Thor his brother. But the bond they have now is fractured and it cannot be mended. And if their relationship does get fixed, I wonder how it's gonna happen. Now Bill states that he will be a friend of Asgard in the time of need, but fighting to find his own path, his own power. He wonders if he's still of Asgard. Does he ever stand among them? And that after all of this time with the Asgardians, will he truly ever know the minds of gods, since he only is a man? Now Sif tells Bill that he's more than just a man, and Bill responds to her by saying that her words are kind, but they are just words. They're easily said, but hard to accept, and that if Loki is telling the truth, Thor better knows what he is asking. But the narrator says that Thor does indeed know what he asks of Beta Ray Bill, and that's because Thor knew the weight of what he asked better than anybody who lived, and anybody who held that weight was marked by it, even those who had greater weights to carry. And now on Arakko, we see Storm. And Storm is a commander of armies, but she isn't a queen, and there are no thrones on Arakko, but Thor is a king. And the narrator says that Thor is used to storms answering to his call. Then we see Hugin and Munin, Thor's ravens, and they tell Storm that she has been summoned. And Aurora Monroe is the storm, and the narrator says that she shaped it as her birthright. And she is an Omega level mutant, so her power has no limits and nobody can surpass her. Then the narrator says that no normal winds could take her where she did not want to go, but this wasn't a normal wind. These were dimensional winds casted by an ancient magic by Thor. And magic is within Storm's blood, but she wasn't strong enough to counter these winds. But not yet. Now we back on the moon where Thor was, and he apologizes for summoning Storm so abruptly, and she'll accept his apology if he returns her to Arakko. And I do understand her urgency because she was about to fight Genesis in X-Men Red, and that is also written by Al Ewing, who is writing this story as well. Now Thor tells Storm to give him a moment because Thor couldn't trust his ravens to relay the seriousness of Thor's message and his urgent need for Storm. Now Storm cuts Thor off by snapping her fingers and hitting Thor with lightning. And that lightning strike looked like it stung Thor. Then the narrator says the blue and gray area of the moon have pockets of air, and along with that, weather. But now Storm is like, bro, your message was that urgent that you needed to kidnap me from Arakko? Take me back home, dog. Then Thor looks at her and says her name, then gets hit with lightning again. And Thor is like, bro, stop hitting me. And Storm is like, excuse me? But Thor tells her that he wasn't speaking to her, but instead the lightning. Now Storm is saying that she's tired of people making her miss her strikes. But Thor's like, dog, the lightning loves me just like it loves you. We shouldn't make it choose. And the lightning can't hurt me, so what's the point? And Storm says that she trusts the lightning to tell the seriousness of her message. But even though she loves lightning, there are more universal forces. And she uses atmospheric pressure to crush Thor. And she uses the atmospheric pressure of Jupiter. And that got my boy Thor ears bleeding. Then she tells Thor that he commands the storm, but she commands weather, and not as a king on a throne, but she commands the weather as an equal. Now the narrator is saying that Storm spoke the truth, and the only thing that Thor could do while the weight of Jupiter is crushing him was smile. Then Thor asks, who is stronger? And Storm is like, what? Then Thor gets up opposing the weight of Jupiter on his back, Then he says about his question, those like him and Storm are always asked, who's stronger? Then Thor asks some rhetorical questions, like can he arm wrestle the Hulk, or race Quicksilver, or challenge Willie Lumpkin to a contest of wiggling ears. That's crazy, bruh. Then Thor says to measure the results and write it down to see who's worthy. But he says strength is relative to the need for it, and that if he has to stand on Jupiter, he will. He will stand on anything if the need is great and the cause is just. Thor finishes his monologue by saying that we are not measured by strength, nor by raw power, and the hammer within our hand. Then he throws Mjolnir. With the crushing air of another world on Thor, he throws Mjolnir with all of his force and might. And he threw Mjolnir at Storm, and you can see she caught it. And the narrator calls Mjolnir the Crusher, the great warhammer of legend, forged with myth and Uru, filled with the all-magic of Thor, the All-Father. And it brought trouble to all of Thor's enemies, but hope to those that are his friends. And when Storm caught Mjolnir, there was lightning. And it was written before by Odin. Then Thor finishes the saying, whoever holds the hammer, if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. Now we see Storm wielding Mjolnir with the power of Thor. And y'all can see her whole new uniform, bro. That's hard, bro. Then right after that happens, Thor tells her to look up. And he was coming closer, but he is here now. It's Tornos, the Utgard Thor. And Tornos says some interesting things. That he was the first Thunderer, and that he was with the gods at the forming of Earth, and that he's going to bring an end to all of these things. Bro, look at how big he is compared to Thor and Storm. Now Storm is like, bro, you summoned me to fight that? Yeah, you was right, it was urgent. Then Thor tells her that Tornos wants to destroy him and Midgard, and Thor suspects that Orako will not evade Tornos for long. Then Thor says what Tornos is saying is true. He is the elder god of thunder, and even with the all-power, Thor cannot defeat him. But Thor has his own power and a plan. Then he asks Storm, will she trust him? Then Tornos says trust the wheel of fate and throws it at them. Then they dodge the wheel, and Storm says that she'll trust Thor depending on the plan, and that she has her own power, and that she has rejected Thor's before. And Storm says that she doesn't need the hammer to call down the thunder. And then through a portal, Loki arrives. And Loki apologizes to Storm about giving her the power of Thor as a scheme. And that took place during giant-sized X-Men Annual number 9 in 1985. Loki gave Storm the power of Thor, and Loki created this hammer that Storm has. And the hammer's name is Stormcaster. Because she lost her powers, but Loki was only doing that as a scheme. Loki had their own secret agenda. And that happens again during X-Men to Serve and Protect number 3. Thor brought Storm this thing that had her name on it, and it so happened to have Stormcaster within it. And she went to grab the hammer, but Thor's like, nah bro, don't do that. And she did it anyway, and she was corrupted by it. And then they fought for a little bit, but then they both grabbed onto Mjolnir and destroyed Stormcaster. And Thor didn't want her to grab the hammer because he knew it would corrupt her because of Loki. Like y'all can see him in the back right here, like it was all Loki's plan. Now back to the story. After Loki apologized to Storm, Loki says to Storm, please don't throw that hammer at me. Then Thor looks at Storm and tells her to throw Mjolnir at Loki. And now Storm throws the hammer at Loki, saying that she trusts Thor's plan now. And as Mjolnir is going towards Loki, Loki is like, bro, I ain't catching that. That's a hero's task. And Loki says that they have one right here and tells Beta Ray Bill to come through. And Bill catches the hammer, and Loki says, Mjolnir is yours again, to hold high as a warrior of Asgard. And we see my boy Beta Ray Bill in his classic outfit, bro. And if you don't know, Beta Ray Bill was first introduced during the Mighty Thor written by Walter Simonson in issue 337. So Scuttlebutt, which is Beta Ray Bill's ship, was detected by S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury sent Thor to go check it out. And Thor got on his ship and was checking it out, and Beta Ray Bill saw him there, and they fought. And Mjolnir was on the ground because Beta Ray Bill and Thor was just throwing hands, so Thor turned back into his human form, Donald Blake. And then Mjolnir reverted back into the stick that Donald Blake uses to transform into Thor. And Bill saw it on the ground, and he saw that he was worthy of Mjolnir since he was wielding it. and now he had the power of Thor. Now back to the story. Bill says that he forgot what it felt like to hold the hammer, and that it felt like all of Asgard is holding him at her very heart. And Thor says that it's a shame on him since Bill forgot what it felt like. But Thor says it's not the time for that right now because Tornos is calling his will back, and Thor and his team are not at full strength yet. Then Storm comes over like, yo, I see where this is going. She asks Thor how long do they have his power without the hammer, and he says 60 seconds. Then Thor tells Loki that it's his turn, and Beta Ray Bill extends his arm to Loki, and Loki grabs Mjolnir, and now Loki has the power of his brother, Thor. And that made me question, is Loki worthy? Because I know Thor chooses who is worthy now, but is Loki worthy of Mjolnir? But Loki has wielded Mjolnir before, and it was during the event Axis. And there was an inversion spell that turned heroes into villains and villains into heroes. Now in Axis issue 9, Thor was chasing Loki, and Thor was on a mission to erase Loki. Then Loki saw Mjolnir, and he said if he don't pick it up, he's gonna die, literally and metaphorically. And Thor was saying that he never loved Loki, and that Loki was a disappointment to the family. Then Loki whacks Thor with Mjolnir. Then we see another iteration of that same situation during Loki Agent of Asgard, issue 9. And that story is also written by Al Ewing, who is writing Immortal Thor. Now back to the story. Loki says the number of magic is 5, so there's a Thor missing because there was only 4. Now Loki and Beta Ray Bill throw the hammer in the sky, and Tornos tries to grab it, but nah, it wasn't going to him because the magic of Mjolnir is not his to command. And now Mjolnir was going to Jane Foster, who was once Thor, back during Jason Aaron's run, but she is now a Valkyrie. And the narrator says since the magic of Mjolnir was not Tornos' to command, and that power belonged to the Allfather. Now unlike Odin, Allfather Thor, the king of Asgard, was always happy to share. Then now he says to Tornos, you cannot defeat me when I was alone. But now Tornos, you face the Thor Corps. And now it's 5 against 1. We got Thor, Loki, Beta Ray Bill, Storm, and Jane Foster, all having the power of Thor. And I wonder how this battle is going to end. And now we see somebody talking on the phone, and I'm just like, I know that ain't who I think it is, bruh. And this person says, the movies are mine, the live action biopics are mine, the animated adaptations are mine, even the video games, the Underoos, the lunchboxes are all mine. And they hold the very first issue of Thor, Journey into Mystery, number 83. And they say that plain text can't tell the full story. So now they will tell the full story, and that they will create the true story. And this person says, within this time, in this place, in this realm, they will be the Skald. And to make them understand, in the name of Roxanne, who is thy first, last, and only God. When they said Roxanne, bruh, I already knew who it was. And this Dario Agger. And he's back. I don't know how, but he's back. Because the last time I saw him, bruh, he was towed up by Zimnu back in Immortal Hulk. And that story right there is also written by Al Ewing, if you didn't know. So we start here with a perfect spear, with the dark side of the moon, Tornos' wheel in the middle, and I don't know what planet that is on the right, but hey, it's there. We also have a dialogue from the narrator. There is light on the dark side of the moon, where Tornos, the Elder God, is fighting against Gaia's son, Thor, and those who stand with him. And the Elder God has the wheel of fate in his hand, and the wheel turns, and it keeps turning, and it's always ready to turn. Now the question is brought up, understand ye yet, or what? And y'all know we've seen that question before. Now the narrator continues by saying, all weather turns to storm. And this has happened before, and it will happen again. The hands on a clock are going to turn, the wheel is going to turn, and now the page is turning. Now when I read this and saw this 2-page spread, I instantly thought of this panel right here. And these are the Elder Gods of the Marvel Universe. But now let's get back to what we saw. We saw the face of a demiurge. And the narrator says that there were demiurges before, and they existed within realities that were alive that are now not alive. But there is a demiurge to come. But this specific demiurge was a pre-mortal and created gods. The demiurge's name and knowledge is not known to those who existed within primal time, when the Earth was in formation. And the narrator says that the Demiurge's eyes burned with great will. This Demiurge looked upon creation and saw a lot of things that could be done and brought forth aspects of itself. It brought forth gods. One god that is of deep magic, one god that is the wheel in the cycle, and another god that is of life. And the narrator says that there are many more living concepts in the earliest of their kind, and they existed before humanity could name or shape them. Now these gods were the first to look upon the world as it was being formed, and as they saw the world being formed, they saw each other. And they also knew each other as the first gods, the first siblings, and the first enemies. And the narrator says, how can a trick master exist alongside an iron fate? One must be ruled by another. And from that battle came a war. I'm gonna pause right here and say I like how Al Ewing had Utgard Loki and Tornos be born at the beginning to be elder gods. Like he added to Marvel lore but made it really good, and it fits so well, like it makes sense. Now I don't know if y'all noticed this or not, but when I put two and two together, I was like shocked. The Demiurge is Thor's grandfather, and Tornos and Utgard Loki are Thor's uncles. Like really sit here and think about it, cause it says the elder gods are siblings. And to make a connection here, like I gotta do this for y'all. Back during episode 1, Utgard Loki called Tornos him and Gaia's brother. Then he calls Gaia his sister. Alright, now back to the war that was going on. And you see Gaia standing there in the middle of all of that chaos. And the Demiurge is just watching this fight that's every man for himself. And these elder gods fought for thousands of years, repeating a cycle and starting at their beginning every time. But Gaia was the only one that saw past their stagnation. The earth or life within it would not survive this constant fighting, and that predicament wouldn't change unless she created a new cycle. And the narrator says a wheel that turned yet, with each turn made new. And Gaia began her plan. And the narrator says, beware of what you plan. Then we see Thor in the Thor Corps fighting Tornos. Now I forgot to mention this back during episode 4. The Thor Corps has happened before. Twice actually. Now back to this right here. Now the narrator tells us that Thor doesn't know it yet, but he sees the fruit of his mother's labor. And if you don't know or remember what she did, she locked up Tornos a millennia ago. And now she set him free. For what reason? I don't know. But back to the narrator. The narrator says that Tornos was also a god of thunder who has been loosed upon Thor and Midgard. And Thor got his team together in his name to fight back. Now the narrator says that Gaia felt her wheel turning from winter to spring, and we see Jane Foster throw Mjolnir to Loki. And when Loki catches it, they say it's only 60 seconds of Thor time without touching the hammer. Now Loki throws it to Storm, and the hammer goes from spring to summer. Now as soon as she catches it, she throws it away, and she says let's give it to somebody who wants it, and she gives it to Beta Ray Bill. And now the hammer goes from summer to autumn. Now I ain't gonna lie bruh, Al Ewing is cooking on here, because I don't know if y'all peeped it, he was saying that Gaia's wheel has been turning from winter to spring, spring to summer, and summer to autumn. And that was shown as each character threw the hammer to somebody else, the seasons would change. And within each turn, it will build on the work of the previous turn. Now Beta Ray Bill throws it back to Jane. And Mjolnir passed by Tornos, and he reached for it. And again, he was denied. Then Jane catches the hammer, and she asks Mr. Horse does he want to turn. And he like, nah, I got 4 hooves, that's good enough. Then Tornos throws his wheel, and he said death will claim them all. But Jane like, that's cap, that ain't finna happen. Your wheel finna get a puncture. And she throws Mjolnir, and it cracks the wheel. And the narrator says it was an ill omen for Tornos. I know he was salty, but I'm sitting here like, now we see my boy Thor holding up Tormod, and since Mjolnir cracked the wheel, Thor tells Tornos that is the power of Mjolnir, and Mjolnir is the greatest of all hammers. Its Uru is stronger than ever before, and it's also eager to sever the skull of a Titan. Now the narrator says that those words are true, but Thor was withholding a final truth. And the final truth is that Tornos has yet to taste Mjolnir's greatest power. But here's the kicker, he can feel it very close, and his desire for it grew. And now we see Loki holding Mjolnir, and Loki says it's been a long time since they've held Mjolnir on a fully legitimate basis, and that they've missed it. Now Loki says that magic, mischief, trickery, and storytelling are fun, but there is something about throwing a big hammer at a thunder god's face, and we see Beta Ray Bill like, wait, no, don't do that, but Loki threw it anyway. Now Tornos, the elder god, catches Mjolnir, and when I read this, bruh, and I saw it, I'm like,
What the fuck is up with this shit here?
like when this happened, bro, I'm just sitting here like, there's no way this happened, bro. Like I was shocked. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, how is they finna defeat Tornos? Now we see the Thor core just staring up at Tornos. And he says the hammer is his now, and that time runs, and within moments, you will lose the power of Thor. And against him, they will be helpless. Then we see Thor's power fading away from Storm and Beta Ray Bill. And Storm says the 60 seconds are up and that she can feel the Asgardian strength leaving her. But she still has her power over the weather. And she starts to think that it's just now going to be her and Thor against him. But y'all just wait to see what happens. And Bill is like, I don't understand this. How can our enemy Tornos even lift the hammer? Then Thor tells him that the reason is simple. He deems Tornos worthy of the power of Thor. And I will say again, for those who don't know or just don't remember, Thor chooses who is worthy of Mjolnir now. And now since Thor deemed Tornos worthy of Mjolnir and having the power of Thor, we now see Tornos wielding Mjolnir with the power of Thor. Then Tornos goes to tell the Thor core that nothing is beyond him now, and that the ancient storm meets with the new, and the past and future are one within him. And he says that he's going to turn them all into dust and bones, and that everything will end in a sea of fire and blood. And I don't know if y'all peeped it, but Tornos' wheel of fate turned into a shield. So now Jane calls out to Thor, but Loki like, just give him a second. And Thor says to Tornos, like, I know you got a goal, and before you do that, I got a question for you. Answer it if you can. Then Thor asks Tornos, what is the power of Thor? And by the way Tornos looking after that question, he like,
Huh?
Now Tornos is like, what is happening to me? What have you done? And Thor tells Tornos, when people called me in ancient times, rain lashed and lightning struck. As roofs were falling in and boats being capsized, what power did they invoke? Did those people want the storm to rage on even worse than the last moment? And Thor says no, and he tells Tornos that the power of Thor is the power to hold the storm back, and that his greatest power and strength took him the longest to learn, and that great power and great strength is knowledge and how to use it well, with compassion, restraint, nobility, and hard-won wisdom, but most of all, being humble. Then he says the power of Thor is to be worthy, and that's another very good double entendre. But if Thor can grant the power and see no rule against it, then Tornos deserves it more than anybody, because Thor sees that he needs it greatly. But now Tornos starts tripping. Then he throws Mjolnir back at Thor, and he does this because Thor made him gain a conscience. And then you look back to earlier in the issue, you see the elder gods were just like mindless beasts, just fighting each other just constantly. Now Thor catches Mjolnir, and he says what is seen cannot be unseen. The heart is now open and it cannot be simply closed. And he asks Tornos, the god of ancient thunders, how does his heart feel? And this man Tornos is in pain. He says it burns and it screams. His heart shrieks and he curses Thor. Then Tornos says to Thor, with this soul torture, may you wear a crown of all of my torments upon your head. And he says this because he was shown what he was loosed upon the earth to do. And those who commanded him, his brother, the magic maker, Utgard Loki, and the one who sealed him away, Thor's mother, Gaia. And y'all can see the shock on Thor's face from when he hears that from Tornos. And the narrator says that somewhere Gaia felt the cold of a winter as Thor learned this truth. And those words echoed louder than any type of thunder in Thor's ears, and he roared back at Tornos with an equal force in his rage like a storm. And we see Thor yelling like, what you mean, bro? Like, tell me, Tornos, like, what you mean by this? Like, I know I would be acting the same way as Thor if somebody told me that my mom sealed them away and then unsealed him and had him do something against me. Now Storm calmed down Thor because he was so angry, but we see an empty sky, and Thor's plan worked. And Thor's plan was to make him want Mjolnir, then give him Mjolnir, then infect him with Mjolnir. And Storm says that gave Tornos the agony of conscience. Then she asks Thor did he really truly need her to play along with his trick against Tornos. And Thor tells her that he needed people who knew Mjolnir the best, and those people who wield Mjolnir perfectly and instinctively. And if those heroes showed character and example of what Mjolnir really is to be worthy, then that would make everything better. Now he tells Storm that his war is over with, and if she needs help, he will come to Arakko and help her fight. And she tells him that it will be taken as an insult by both sides of the war, and that Thor might lose the fight that Storm wants to win. But the gift she will take is a ride home, because it'll save her the long journey. And Thor asks her, is there anything else you need? And she tells him to keep Orcus on his enemy list. Then she also tells him that she wants to make a heroic entrance to rally her troops, and that she does miss wearing a cape. And Thor gives her his cape. Now as he sends her back to Arakko, he says he owes Storm a debt, and it's a debt that he's going to repay in greater measure. And that goes for Beta Ray Bill as well. Now Thor tells Bill that he was the truest of friends to him, and that it really pains him that he was not the best friend to Bill. Then Bill tells Thor that those were dark days and they left deep wounds, but they now have begun the work of healing what was broken, and that lifts Beta Ray Bill's heart. And as he's about to leave, he says next time Thor can do the honors of carrying the Twilight Sword into battle. And Thor tells his friend that the honor would be his. And the Twilight Sword is basically a replacement weapon for Stormbreaker. And just like Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, you had to be worthy to wield this sword. And Beta Ray Bill had to fight Surtur to claim it. And I ain't gonna cap, bruh, this was my favorite part of the issue because I've been waiting on this to happen. But after what happened during Kate's run and Daniel Warren Johnson's miniseries about Beta Ray Bill, I was wondering and waiting for the day they would become friends again. But I knew Thor would have to apologize for everything that he did. Now let's get back to the story. Beta Ray Bill did say those were dark days that he had in the past, and Thor is now saying he fears that the dark days have not ended. And after I read that specific line, I'm like, yeah, something crazy finna happen with Thor, like, something finna go down. Now Jane pulled Thor to the side to talk to him about what happened in Valhalla, and Odin did warn her about warning Thor about what's to happen. And she says there have been omens, nightmares in heaven, and fates that are dark linked to Mjolnir. And she says a warrior holding Mjolnir will meet their end soon. And Scourge was the one that had that dream. He had a dream of Thor holding Mjolnir and the hammer y'all know now as Tormod, and with Megingjord, the belt of strength, facing his bloody end. And that also made me think about the end of the Immortal Thor prologue where we saw this panel right here. This all just makes me eager to know what's gonna happen with Thor. Now since Jane said that a warrior holding Mjolnir will meet their end soon, Thor says he won't let it out of his hand again. The whole time, she's talking about him. And I know y'all probably wondering what that purple thing above Thor's head is. And when I saw it, I instantly thought of this story right here. In issue 1 of this story, Jane saw somebody that was about to die. Then she saw a lot of people that were in danger of losing their lives. And she saw those many people in danger because it was this bomb disguised as an actual human. But now let's get back to this. The narrator says that Jane saw the danger above Thor's head. It was only danger, not Thor's death. Not yet. And when I read the part that said not yet, I'm like, yeah, this word immortal is finna get put to use. Now Thor is saying that he's salty about his father interfering in his life and that he chose Jane to be his agent. But Jane like, nah, he didn't. Odin found a way to free somebody from Valhalla to do his dirty work for him. And that person is Scourge, the executioner. And he got free from Valhalla with the help of Odin by like faking his death. And there was a back door that only Odin knew about so that Scourge could leave. But now let's get back to where we was. Dario Agger says he loves Scourge's work, but Scourge like, bro, I'm not here because I want to be here. He says that his friend tells him that Dario Agger is the keeper of Thor's legend in this world. and that might be useful to Scourge and his friend. And Dario Agger says he has made some acquisitions, but they're not public knowledge yet. And Scourge like, yeah, whatever, bruh. There's knowledge beyond knowledge. He had a vision while he was dead, and he saw Thor saving the world from disaster. And Scourge and his friend think they have a mutual interest in stopping Thor from saving the world. And Dario Agger says disaster is where the money is, and that is true, and that he thinks that they can do business with each other. Then he meets Scourge's friend, Enchantress. Now this concludes the first arc of the Immortal Thor. Man, y'all, I'm eager to know what's gonna happen in the future of this story. I cannot wait. But let me know y'all thoughts or theories if y'all have them in the comments. Like and subscribe. I'll catch y'all in the next one. God bless. I'm out.